I'm Melina Cruz, 28 wedding singer and the forgotten cousin. The mic screeched as I stepped onto the back patio, a cheap Bluetooth speaker already mid-song. Paper lanterns swayed over the pool, and someone had rigged up a silver tinsel curtain behind a white folding table labeled Cruz Family Talent Show. My name wasn't on the list taped beside it. It never was. Melina, Aunt Carla called out as she brushed past, arms full of cupcakes shaped like music notes. Be a dear and help the kids with the karaoke machine. Would you? You're good at that sort of thing. That sort of thing. A plastic stool scraped behind me. My cousin Theo was already halfway into his impersonation of Elvis, shaking his hips with the theatrical confidence that always seemed to buy him applause no matter what he did. Thank you. Thank you very much. He slurred into the mic, and everyone roared, even though he was off-key. I stood to the side near the sound table, unnoticed, holding my own mic. I had brought it from my studio apartment in Queens, thinking naively that this would be the year they asked. I'd recorded demos, worked open mics for 3 years straight, took night shifts just to afford lessons, but none of that mattered here. Here, I was still little Lena, the girl who sang too loud at Grandpa's funeral and was told she ruined Ave Maria. Hey, are you gonna sing? One of the teens asked, balancing a paper plate stacked with lemon bars. I smiled. If there's time, there never was. The final act before intermission was my sister Marisol, dressed in a glittery red jumpsuit and clutching a rhinestone mic she used as a prop. She lip-synced to a Beyoncé medley while everyone clapped and cheered like it was the VMAs. Her best friend filmed it on her phone. Uncle Ramon leaned toward the mic at the end, glancing at the time. All right, everyone, intermission. Grab some food. Hydrate. Stretch your legs. Next up, we've got the dance crew, the comedy duo, and, oh, where's little Stevie with his ukulele? I cleared my throat. Stepped toward him. Actually, Uncle, I brought a song, something I wrote. If there's... He blinked. Oh, sweetie, we're a little packed this year, but maybe next time. Okay. He patted my shoulder like I was 6. You're so sweet to help with the sound. I nodded slowly, stepping back. The mic in my hand suddenly felt like a brick. I turned it off, laid it down on the sound table, and walked away. No one noticed. If you've ever been sidelined like that, like your voice was too much or never enough, drop a comment or tell me where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in a room full of family. I was halfway to the folding chairs when a voice cut through the laughter. Excuse me. The DJ had stopped the music. Everyone turned. A tall woman in navy heels and an ivory pantsuit walked through the patio doors. She held a crisp white envelope in her hands, and something about her presence calm, clipped, deliberate snapped the atmosphere like a twig. Is there a Melina Cruz here? She asked, scanning the crowd. Her voice was familiar. My stomach turned. Everyone turned toward me, confused. I raised my hand slowly. That's me. She stepped forward, handing me the envelope. I'm Suzanne Reed from WNYR Radio. We've been trying to contact you. Your demo was selected for this month's Indie Spotlight. Your original track airs tonight at 8. A long, silent beat. Even the kids stopped chewing. Then someone dropped their fork. My fingers trembled around the envelope. I could hear my own heart beating over the quiet. For the first time that day, every single face was looking at me, not through me. I didn't know what to say. Suzanne Reed from WNYR. Her voice had filled my studio apartment every Thursday at midnight for the last 4 years. She was the reason I even dared to send out that demo. The way she always said, even whispers deserve a spotlight. And now she was standing here, in my aunt's backyard, while everyone gawked like I'd grown wings. She smiled, a real one, I apologize for the interruption, but when our intern tracked your address to this party, we realized you were performing here today. We thought it was fitting. I laughed. Or something like it. Actually, I wasn't. The smile didn't leave her face, but her brows lifted subtle. Ah, well, maybe you should. She reached into her blazer and handed me a pair of black headphones. Here, the track's cued. You have 4 minutes if you want to let them hear what's already on the air. I looked around. Aunt Carla's face had drained of color. Theo stood frozen beside the snack table, a deviled egg in one hand, his mouth slightly open. Marisol blinked rapidly like she was buffering. "Play it," someone whispered. I walked back to the sound table with the headphones and plugged them into the mixer. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My whole body felt strangely still, like it was being moved by something else entirely. And then my voice came through the patio speakers. Not the little girl they remembered. Not the cousin who sang too loud at funerals or sat out the talent shows. A woman. A voice forged in empty train stations and late-night cafes, in alleys behind gig bars and cramped stairwells with bad reverb and no heat. I closed my eyes as the chords swelled soft. Steady. Then the first verse. My voice. Raw and trembling but sure. Pouring through the backyard like spilled velvet. The lyrics weren't flashy. They were quiet. About loss. About being in a room where no one sees you. About wanting someone to say your name like it mattered. When the bridge hit, I opened my eyes. Uncle Ramon's hands were on his hips, his lips tight but unreadable. Marisol was staring at the grass. A kid who had shoved past me earlier was now sitting cross-legged, listening. Even Theo had set the deviled egg down. No one said a word until the last note faded. Then clapping. Not polite clapping. Not the awkward, fill the silence kind. This was slow, stunned, pulled from somewhere deep applause. Then Suzanne again. I've played thousands of tracks, but this one made me stop what I was doing. I had to know who sang it. I heard Aunt Carla murmur, "She made that, she is that," Suzanne corrected, gently but firmly. The silence that followed felt like a reset button had just been hit on my entire family. But I didn't bask. I didn't even smile. I just nodded and said, "Thanks." Because the real work had been done already at night. When no one heard me. When I was doubting everything. When I couldn't afford groceries but still paid for mixing software. Suzanne gave me her card and a wink. "See you on Monday at the station." Then she left. Heels clicking on concrete, the way people do when they're used to walking through doors with names on them. I stood there holding the card like a lottery ticket I'd scratched in secret. Aunt Carla was the first to speak. "Why didn't you tell us?" I tilted my head. When was I supposed to, before or after passing out lemonade and babysitting your grandkids? Her eyes dropped. Uncle Ramon cleared his throat. "That was good. Real good. Lena." He hadn't called me that in years. Marisol stepped forward. "So, you're famous now?" I shrugged. "Not really. Just heard on the radio. But that's kind of a big deal." "Yeah, kind of." She looked at me the way you look at someone you thought was ordinary until they did something you could never do. Her glittery jumpsuit suddenly looked like a costume. I spent the rest of the evening floating between small conversations. People asking me what the lyrics meant, what else I'd recorded, where I lived now, if I'd sing again next year. I smiled through it, gave vague answers. I didn't want to explain that this song was about them, about this feeling, that the bridge was built from every ignored text, every missed birthday, every time they called my dream a phase. Later, when the patio cleared out and only the paper lanterns and half-empty wine bottles remained, I sat beside the pool with my headphones on, listening to the track again. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to hear it in the quiet without the applause, without the awkward stares. Just me and the music. Aunt Carla brought me a piece of cake, lemon with strawberry jam, my favorite since I was a kid. She didn't say anything, just left it on the bench beside me. It was something small, but something. If you've ever had to prove you belonged in a place where no one believed in you, if you've ever held back your gift because the room didn't feel ready, hit subscribe. Or don't. I'm not here for applause. Just truth. And truth has a voice. Even if it starts quiet. The Monday after the party. I barely slept. I must have checked the time 100 times between 2 a.m. and sunrise. I wasn't nervous, not in the shaky panic kind of way. It was more like an ache under my ribs. A pressure that had waited too long to be exhaled. I'd never been inside a real radio station before. I'd only imagined it from the sound, the quiet shuffle of paper in the background, the soft clink of mugs against wood, the dim yellow light of early morning hosts. I'd conjured that world from snippets I heard at 2 a.m., listening to artists speak about what their music cost them, what it gave them in return. WNYR was tucked behind a bookstore and a florist, with glass doors that barely looked like an entrance. I paused before walking in, adjusting the only blazer I owned. It had a small rip in the inner lining, stitched up badly with pink thread. No one else would see it, but I felt it like a secret. Inside, the receptionist barely looked up. Name Melina Cruz. I'm here to meet Suzanne Reed. She typed something. She's waiting for you in Studio B. Straight down. Second left. I walked the hallway slowly, reading the framed posters lining the wall, old album covers, platinum plaques, soundboard photos. Everything smelled like cold coffee and dust and history. Studio B had a red light blinking above it. I hesitated, then knocked. Suzanne opened the door herself. Right on time, she said, gesturing for me to come in. I was just queuing up your track again. The phone lines blew up after it aired. Thought you should hear some of it. I sat in the chair across from her, my hands in my lap. Still getting used to this, she asked, adjusting the dials. Used to not being invisible. Yeah. It's weird. She looked at me with a kind of smile that wasn't pity, it was recognition. You're not invisible. You just haven't been in the right light yet. The first caller's message played through the speakers. Hi, I don't know who that last artist was. Melina something, but that song. Names in the dark. It made me pull over. My mom passed last year and I felt seen. Please play it again. Then another. That voice. That raw edge. She's not performing. She's remembering. I felt that. My throat tightened. These were strangers. And they were hearing me, not the filtered performance version, but the real thing I'd recorded late one night. Crying between takes. Suzanne sat back. We get a lot of good submissions. But this wasn't just good. It was true. You didn't try to sound like anyone. You weren't trying to prove anything. That's rare. I didn't think anyone would hear it. I admitted. Not really. But you sent it anyway. I nodded. That's what makes an artist. She slid a folder across the table. This is a development contract. Not a record deal. Not yet. But it gives you studio time, mentorship, and live mic exposure. We want to help you shape what's already there, if you're open to it. I stared at the folder like it might vanish. You're not obligated, she added. You can take time, think about it, but I have a feeling you already know. I did. I knew the second I sang that last verse and felt something inside me settle, not pride, just alignment, like something that had been cracked, had finally clicked into place. I want this, I said. Her smile widened. Good. The rest of the meeting went by in a blur, scheduling sessions, discussing vocal coaches, some promotional ideas. It was professional, efficient. and above all, real. I wasn't someone's cousin here. I wasn't someone's helper or background noise. I was the artist. When I walked back out into the city sun, the sidewalk felt different under my feet. Not because anything had changed outside, but because I had stopped walking like I was apologizing for being there. That night, I called my mom. She was the only one in the family who didn't make the talent show. She hadn't felt well and stayed home, texting me emojis the whole time. She picked up on the second ring. Mi amor, I heard from your aunt that something big happened. I smiled. Yeah, it did. I told her everything about the radio, the applause, the contract. She cried softly on the other end. Then she said the thing I'd needed for years. I always knew. Since you were 6 and sang to the washing machine like it was your audience. We laughed. I leaned against the kitchen counter, eyes closed, letting that moment sink into me like warm sun after cold water. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Studio sessions, interviews, vocal warm-ups, scheduling rehearsals. I started sleeping 4 hours a night and drinking way too much peppermint tea, but I was alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Still, I didn't tell the rest of the family much. After that party, there were a few congratulatory texts, some polite likes on social media, but no one asked deeper questions. No one invited me to talk about it at dinner or share more songs. It was like they were proud, from a distance. And maybe that was fine. Maybe some people only know how to love you once the world does first. One Sunday, I walked past a park and heard someone humming my melody, a woman on a bench, earbuds in, mouthing along to the chorus. She didn't know me, didn't know I was 10 feet away, holding back tears. That was when I realized family doesn't always look like the people you share blood with. Sometimes it's strangers humming your song like it's part of them. Sometimes it's late-night listeners calling in to say thank you. Sometimes it's the woman in the pantsuit who stops everything because she believes you matter. If you've ever had to build your voice alone, if you've ever poured your soul into something and hoped someone, anyone, would care, know this. Your voice matters. Even if no one claps, even if no one at home listens, someone out there will, and they'll hear you, loud and clear. It wasn't until I was sitting in the makeup chair before my first radio lounge session that I realized I hadn't invited anyone from my family. I stared at myself in the mirror, eyes rimmed with soft gold, lips glossed a little too perfectly, hair brushed smooth by someone named Jada who hummed while she worked. You got that glazed-over look, she said, twisting one of my curls around her finger. First time performing live. I nodded. For radio. Yeah. Nerves are good. It means you care. Just don't let them steal your breath. I took that in slowly. It had been 3 weeks since the party. 3 weeks since I'd stood in the middle of my aunt's backyard and let my voice fill the silence. Since then, it had been all momentum. Every day layered with new things to learn how to stand, how to protect my throat, how to smile for cameras without looking like I was gritting my teeth. But that morning, in the quiet of the green room, I felt the absence. Not of my mother, she was listening from home, curled under a blanket with her mug and her loyalty. But of the rest, no one had asked for the link to the live broadcast. No one had offered to come along or even texted good luck. It wasn't cruelty. It was something colder, disinterest. I stood up and walked to the corner of the studio, pretending to stretch my arms while I checked my phone. A message had come in. Finally. Marisol Hope. You kill it today. Break a leg or whatever singers say. I stared at the words. Polite. Flat. Like a coworker wishing me well on a dental appointment. Still, I typed back. Me thanks. It's live at 1. I'll send the link. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. She didn't respond. 5 minutes. Melina. Someone called? I breathed in, out. then walked onto the small lounge stage. The setup was cozy dimmed string lights, 2 stools, a mic stand, and a soundboard operator tucked in the corner. Suzanne was already seated, smiling like this was the best part of her week. "Welcome back to WNYR's Indie Lounge," she said into her mic. "Today we have something special, a debut performance from a voice we discovered just weeks ago, and who, if the streaming numbers are any clue, is about to have a very, very big year." She turned to me. "Melina Cruz. Welcome." I smiled and leaned into the mic. "Thanks. Glad to be here. Tell us a little about what you're singing today." "It's called Porchlight. I wrote it during the lockdown. It's about waiting for someone to notice you, and realizing maybe they won't, but you still keep the light on anyway." I didn't say who the light was for. The backing guitar started. Slow. Familiar. I held the mic with both hands, grounded myself in the floor, and let the first words out. It wasn't perfect. My voice wavered once near the high note. My breath caught in the third verse. But the emotion was real. I saw it in Suzanne's eyes. I felt it in my own chest, pulling tight like the song was echoing right back through me. The final note faded. Silence. Then clapping. Real clapping from the crew. The techs. Even Jada from the hallway. Suzanne leaned over. Mic still hot. "That was beautiful. Thanks," I said, voice thin, when we wrapped. I sat backstage and opened my phone again. Nothing new. No messages. No missed calls. But then, an email. Subject: Porchlight is a soulbreaker. From Michael Green. Capitol Records, A&R. I stared at it. He'd been at the station. In the back. I hadn't even known. His message was short. "Let's talk. Your voice doesn't belong in a lounge. It belongs on vinyl." I dropped my phone. Just for a second. Just to breathe. That night, I finally texted my mom everything. Her reply came instantly. "Mom, I knew the world would catch up to you." Then a follow-up mom also. "Your Tia Marisol posted a clip of your song on her story." No credit. Of course. Just my cousin doing her thing, lol. I laughed bitterly. Some things don't change. Later that week, I got an invitation not from my family but from a local art school. One of the teachers had heard my WNYR performance and asked if I'd consider coming to speak. Most of our kids are low income, first gen. They don't see a lot of examples of success that looks like them. I said yes, not because I felt like an expert, but because I remembered being 12 and sitting in a hot gymnasium, listening to a guest speaker talk about law school, and realizing I'd never heard anyone say music was a real option. The day of the talk, I wore jeans and a hoodie. No makeup. I sat cross-legged in a circle with 20 teenagers, most of them fidgeting with their phones or avoiding eye contact. "I'm Melina," I said. "I grew up being told music was cute. A hobby. Something to grow out of." They looked up. Just a little. I never did. I told them about recording with cheap equipment, watching YouTube tutorials at 3M, busking when I was broke, being passed over for every family showcase, writing songs in the stairwell to keep from crying too loud. And then I sang Porchlight again. No mic, no band. Just my voice, and the echo of a plastic classroom. When I finished, a girl in the back raised her hand. "What kept you going?" I thought about it. Silence. Mostly. The kind that makes you fill it with something just to survive. She nodded, like she understood. When I walked out, the teacher pressed an envelope into my hand. "A small thank you," she said, "and a note from one of the students." The note was folded in 4. "I didn't know you could be quiet and still matter. Thank you." I kept that one, not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me who I was before the radio play, before Suzanne, before contracts and lights and polite smiles from people who never believed in me until it became convenient. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I was singing to stay whole. The first time I went back to my aunt's house after everything, it was by accident. I'd been invited to a cousin's baby shower, Alyssa. I think one of Marisol's sisters. I almost said no, told myself I was too busy, but my mom begged me to go. It's family, she said. You don't have to stay long, just show your face. So I went. I wore a soft brown sweater and black jeans. Nothing flashy. I brought a hand-woven baby blanket I'd picked up at a street market in Brooklyn. I'd never even met Alyssa's husband. That's how disconnected I was from this side of the family. As I pulled up to the curb, I saw the balloons tied to the gate, pale pink and cream, with little gold rattles printed on them. I hesitated in the car for a minute, watching as cousins I barely recognized filtered in and out of the front door, holding diaper cakes and casseroles. No one saw me at first when I entered. The living room was packed, walls covered in pastel banners, tables overflowing with cupcakes, deviled eggs, and sugared fruit slices. The energy was loud, busy, and suffocating. I placed my gift on the pile and tried to blend into the wallpaper. Marisol spotted me first. She waved from across the kitchen. "Hey, stranger," she called out, balancing a mimosa in one hand and gesturing toward me with the other. Look who showed up. A few heads turned, some smiles, a few raised brows. Aunt Carla made a sound like a laugh. "We were wondering if fame made you forget us." I smiled small, restrained. Wouldn't dare. I didn't know where to stand. Every conversation was already flowing without me, every corner filled with people catching up on lives I wasn't part of anymore. I hovered near the snack table, pretending to be deeply invested in arranging a paper napkin. Theo walked up, now sporting a beard and wearing a graphic tee that read, "Bahwan, Dad," even though I wasn't sure he had kids. "Hey, superstar," he said, elbowing me lightly. "You still singing? Or did you quit now that everyone likes it?" I gave a dry chuckle. Still singing. He grabbed a pig in a blanket from the tray. That radio thing was cool. Though, Mom kept playing it on the Alexa until Dad told her to knock it off. Nice to know someone listened, I said. There was a silence. Then he added, "Guess we all underestimated you." It didn't sound like an apology, more like a shrug, a statement of fact. And honestly, I didn't need more than that. "Thanks," I said. I think. Later, during one of the gift opening lulls, I slipped out to the backyard. The air was cooler there, the noise muffled behind glass. I sat on the same bench I'd stood beside that night at the talent show, the same bench where I'd listened to my own voice playing through borrowed speakers. Now it felt like a memory from someone else's life. The patio door creaked open, and someone stepped out. Aunt Carla. She didn't say anything right away, just stood near the edge of the garden, arms folded. I didn't know. She finally said, her voice low, "I really didn't. I thought you were just, playing around, the way kids do." I looked at her, waiting. "I never meant to shut you out," she continued. I didn't think it would turn into anything. Most people didn't," I said quietly. She sat down on the bench beside me, keeping a few inches of space. "You were always quiet," she said. "When the other kids screamed for attention, you just kept to yourself. I guess I mistook that for not caring. I cared," I said. "A lot. I know that now." We sat there, not saying much, while the wind ruffled the paper streamers hanging from the trees. Somewhere inside, someone cheered for a diaper raffle winner. Aunt Carla pulled something out of her purse, a small, folded paper. "Found this while cleaning out Grandma's attic." I opened it. It was a flyer from my first open mic night. Handwritten. Dated 4 years ago. I'd left a few copies on family members' doorsteps, hoping someone might come. No one had, but someone had kept it. "I'm not great at this stuff," she said, saying sorry. "I always thought family was about showing up at barbecues and holidays, but I guess it's about showing up for the stuff you don't understand too." I nodded, tucking the paper into my coat pocket. She stood. "You ever perform around here again? Let me know. I'd like to see it. Really see it." "I will," I said. And maybe I would. The next performance was in a small theater in Brooklyn, a fundraiser for local artists. I was slotted second to last. Not headliner, not opener. Somewhere in the middle, which felt right. Before I went on, I checked my phone out of habit. There, buried under a sea of spam and newsletters, was a message from Marisol. "Marisol heard about your show tonight. Alyssa's babysitter canceled, so we can't make it. But I hope you do great. Seriously." That was something. Small, but something. I sang 3 songs, 2 originals, 1 acoustic cover of a Nina Simone piece. The room was quiet through all of them. Not bored, quiet, respectfully still, like the audience had leaned in without even realizing it. After the show, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. She didn't say much, just hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." That hit me harder than I expected. Because there had been nights when I almost did. Nights I stood alone on subway platforms with my guitar case, wondering what the point was. Nights I left gigs with $40 and a sore throat. Nights I watched others get signed, celebrated, lifted while I remained background noise. But something inside me had refused to let go. A voice deeper than sound. A pulse under the skin. I didn't sing because they cheered. I sang because I had to. Because it was how I stitched the torn parts back together. And now, finally, they were listening. Even if they'd come late. Even if they still didn't know the whole song. They were hearing the echoes now. One Thursday afternoon, I got an email that made me sit down on the kitchen floor. Subject: NPR Tiny Desk. You're invited. Body: Hi Melina. We've been following your story and listening to your releases. We'd love to feature you for a Tiny Desk home concert this season. No pressure, just you, your sound, your space. Let us know if you're interested. Derek H. NPR Music. I stared at the screen, blinking. NPR, Tiny Desk. Me. I laughed, then cried, then sat in silence, letting the magnitude of it wash over me. After years of closed doors, after being asked to hold cameras and pass out flyers while others performed, after family parties where I wasn't even on the program. Now I was the program. I called my mom first. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away. "Do you need help picking your outfit?" she asked. Serious. "We could do something with red. That color always looked good on you." "I don't think anyone dresses up for Tiny Desk." "Mommy," I said, laughing. "It's supposed to feel homegrown. Even better. You'll shine no matter what." We recorded it in my tiny living room. No fancy backdrop. No mood lighting. Just me, my guitar, a loop pedal, and the soft glow of my thrifted floor lamp. I chose 3 songs: Porch Light, Names in the Dark, and 1 new piece I hadn't shared yet, Telescope Heart. That last one, I wrote it for myself, for the part of me that still, after everything, felt like she needed permission. You always loved from afar, afraid you'd ruin the view, but you were never too much. They just had tiny lenses for you. It was gentle, a whisper more than a wail, but when I sang it, I saw the recording crew freeze. The sound guy stopped adjusting the levels. The camera operator's mouth parted just slightly. After the final note, There was a beat of silence, then quiet clapping, awkward but full. You wrote that, someone asked, almost disbelieving. Yeah, I said softly. I didn't cry until they left. I curled up on my couch, arms wrapped around a pillow, and cried for the version of me that had doubted. For the girl who'd walked out of talent shows with her mic still off. For the woman who'd begged the world, just once, to listen. The day the video went live, everything changed. Again, messages poured in, emails from producers, comments from strangers, fan art from teenage girls who said they saw themselves in my voice. But the one that stopped me cold came through Instagram. From a Marisol Ka Cruzo, message watched your tiny desk. Didn't expect to cry. That last song, it was me. It was me. Lena. I'm sorry I never said anything when they made you sit out all those years. I just thought it would be easier for you to be quiet. I stared at the message for 10 minutes before replying. Me, I know. I used to think quiet meant safe. Too. She replied a minute later. Marisol. I see now it just meant invisible. That was the most honest thing we'd ever said to each other. A week after the video went viral, I got a call from Theo. I have a weird question. He said, sheepish. Well, not that weird. Just different. Okay. Alyssa's little girl, Bella. She's obsessed with your voice. Won't stop singing names in the dark around the house. She wants to be a singer. Bad. I smiled. She's got taste. I was wondering, would you ever come by? Not for a performance, just to talk to her. She thinks you're some kind of goddess, only to 6-year-olds. I joked. But yeah, I'd love to, and I meant it. So the next Sunday, I showed up with a little ukulele and a box of cookies. Bella met me at the door wearing a homemade paper crown and a tulle skirt. Are you the Melina? She asked, wide-eyed. I think so, I said. Unless you know another one. She dragged me to her room, where she'd arranged 3 dolls as her audience and 1 stuffed bear as a backup singer. I made a stage, she announced. Sing on it. I sat on a beanbag instead. How about we sing together? Her jaw dropped. Me, yes. You. So we sang. Not perfectly, not on pitch every time, but with joy. Afterward, she asked, were you always good at it? I looked at her carefully. I was always loud, but no one told me I was good. Not for a long time. Why not? Because sometimes people don't know what to do with someone who won't shrink. She nodded like that made perfect sense. Then she said, I won't shrink. Good. I said, don't. I wish I could say that everything changed in my family after that. That they all came to my shows now, or that Aunt Carla printed out my album cover and stuck it on her fridge. But mostly, life just went on. Sometimes they asked about my music, sometimes they didn't. Marisol and I talked more. We never called it a reckoning, just a slow remembering of childhood games, of teen secrets, of a time before jealousy and silence filled the cracks. She sent me photos of her students drawing posters to my lyrics. She told them we used to sing together as kids. That was true. Even if we hadn't for a long time, my mom kept a scrapbook of every article, every flyer, every comment she could print. They'll know someday, she said, even if it takes a while. And maybe that's enough. Recognition doesn't always come in parades. Sometimes it comes in folded notes, in awkward texts, in wide-eyed little girls with tulle skirts and paper crowns. Sometimes it's not about being seen by everyone, just by someone. I still sing every day, not because I have to prove anything now, but because that voice, the one I nearly buried under family silence and self-doubt, is mine. And she deserves to be heard. Even when no one is clapping, even when no one is watching, especially then. By spring, I was doing something I never thought I'd be paid for, writing music full-time. Not just for myself anymore. For other people too. Voiceovers, indie film scores, a podcast intro for a grief therapist in Oregon, a custom anniversary song for a couple in Boston, a graduation anthem for a private high school I'd never even heard of. It was quiet work, mostly, behind the curtain. But I liked it. I liked knowing that my voice, my hands, my sound could slip into someone else's story like a thread. I didn't need to be center stage to feel complete. Still, the industry has a way of pulling you forward, faster than you're ready for. In April, my agent called. "You've been offered the closing slot at the Midtown Arts Festival. Outdoor stage, 8,000 people, give or take." I sat on my bed, barefoot, phone pressed to my cheek, blinking at the rain outside. "Me, yes. You." She paused. "They saw your tiny desk, said you brought stillness into their office, that they haven't stopped thinking about it since." 8,000 people, I repeated. "They'll all be watching you." I didn't say yes right away. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was weight. The kind that settles in your shoulders when you realize your whisper might actually echo now. When I finally agreed, it felt like stepping off a cliff with no harness, just air and instinct. The day of the festival, the sky was cloudless and cruel, hot, bright, unforgiving. I arrived at the staging tent around noon, hours before my set. The crew bustled around with headsets and clipboards. I sipped cold lemon water and tried to stop my hands from fidgeting. Behind me, a woman was adjusting her camera rig when she turned and said, "You're Melina Cruz." "Right," I nodded. She grinned. "We've been playing your song at the crew tent all week." Telescope Heart. I caught my tech lead crying into a granola bar yesterday. I laughed, surprised. Granola bars are powerful like that. She pointed to a table in the distance. "Is that your family over there?" I followed her gaze, and there they were. My mom, of course, sunglasses on, holding a little fan to her neck, wearing the Melina shirt I had begged her not to make, but beside her, Marisol, Theo, Aunt Carla, Alyssa and her baby, even Uncle Ramon, holding a water bottle like it was a trophy. I hadn't invited them. They just came. For a second, I felt something in my throat catch, not pain. Exactly, but an old wound stirring like a memory waking up. I waved. Aunt Carla waved back. Marisol gave a small, nervous thumbs up. I walked over slowly, not sure what to expect. "Don't look so shocked," Marisol said, nudging me. "We've been following your tour page like it's a treasure map. You didn't say anything. Well, we didn't want to jinx it, or make it weird." "It was weird," I said, smiling. "My mom pulled me in. I made sandwiches. They won't let you eat on stage, but I figured you'd be hungry before. You get shaky when you don't eat." I leaned into her shoulder for a second longer than usual. Uncle Ramon cleared his throat. "Heard the governor's coming for the closing set. I hope he brought tissues." Theo muttered. We all laughed. It was awkward, but soft, like trying on clothes that didn't quite fit anymore but still held the warmth of old threads. When the stage lights rose, I stepped out with only my guitar and my voice. No backup, no smoke machines, just me. The crowd was a blur of shapes and sound. So many faces, so many phones in the air. But I locked eyes with no one. I kept my gaze low, near the horizon, near the tree line just behind the tents. The first song was Porchlight. The second was Telescope Heart. The third, I hadn't planned, but I felt it rising. Names in the Dark, the song that started it, the one they'd all ignored until someone else said it was beautiful. As I sang, I let the quiet parts be quiet. I didn't chase the notes or dramatize the chorus. I just let the truth fall where it would. Near the end, something changed. The air shifted. The crowd, restless and humming before, fell into stillness. 8,000 people holding their breath, and in the front row, Marisol cried, not hidden, not behind sunglasses, tears running freely down her cheeks. When the final note died, there was no delay. The applause erupted like thunder, real, roaring, from the feet-up kind of applause. I bowed, once, then looked directly at my family. They weren't clapping the loudest, but they were clapping. And this time, they meant it. Backstage, everything blurred. Flowers, contracts, flashbulbs, an interview in a sweaty trailer, a producer asking if I'd headline next year. But all I wanted was to go home. Not to the stage, not to the studio. Home. So I did. I took the late train back to my apartment, changed into pajamas, ate leftover dumplings out of the box, then opened my window and just listened to the city noise, the hum of the streetlight, the echo of that applause still ringing somewhere between my bones and my ears. I didn't cry. I just sat there, full, not of pride, not of victory, just fullness. Like the sound finally had space to breathe, like the silence had made room for something better. A week later, I visited Bella again. She was learning chords on a secondhand keyboard, one finger at a time. Want to write a song, I asked her. She nodded. So we did. 2 chords, 8 lines. A melody so simple it almost disappeared. But when she sang it, she smiled like she'd made the sky. That's what music is. I told her, it's not noise. It's naming something before it fades. She nodded. Serious. Like memories. Exactly like that. She went back to playing. And I just sat and listened, like someone finally taught me how. The last call I got from my grandma came 2 months after the festival. She was quiet on the line, her voice tinny with age and static. I saw you on TV, she said. Matter of fact, didn't understand half the lyrics, but you look like you belonged there. I smiled into the receiver, sitting cross-legged on my floor with my laptop open, guitar beside me, and candle wax pooling on the edge of my notebook. Thanks, Abuela. You know, she went on, when you were 5, you sang at your cousin Javi's baptism, loud as a car horn, off-key, too. I remember. I thought. That one's either going to be a preacher or a problem. Turns out, you were both. I laughed. It sounded tired but warm. I'd been rehearsing late nights for a tiny label showcase, and my voice had that familiar sandpaper edge from overuse and not enough water. Then she added, I'm glad you didn't let the family make you small. That silenced me. She had never said anything like that before, never commented on my singing beyond the occasional nod or half smile. And now, this. Out of nowhere. I used to think being humble meant hiding, she said. But maybe it just means knowing when to speak, and knowing when your voice is the only thing in the room that makes sense. I swallowed hard. That's beautiful. She sighed. I stole it from a priest. But it works. She passed away 3 weeks later. Peacefully, they said. In her sleep, they said. And when the funeral came, I was asked to sing. At first, I didn't want to. It felt too on the nose, too symbolic, too weighted with all the things we'd never said when it mattered. But then I thought of her last words, and I agreed. The church was modest. White walls, soft wood pews, a gold cross suspended above a dais worn down by 100 years of grief. I wore a black dress and no makeup. I brought my guitar but didn't use it. Just my voice. The song I chose was one I wrote the night she died. I hadn't titled it yet. Just knew it came from that place, the one where old wounds and love sit at the same table. I sang it slowly, with breath between each line, not to perform, not to impress, but to name the grief out loud, so it wouldn't stay hidden in our throats. When I finished, there was no clapping, just silence, reverent, shared. And in that moment, I felt something settle again. Not closure, not quite, but peace. After the funeral, people approached me with half smiles and low voices. "You've made us proud. Your voice is a gift." She would have loved that. It was kind, meant well, but I didn't need it. What I remembered most was Marisol standing in the church hallway, her eyes still rimmed with tears, holding her phone. "She sent me this," she said, showing me a text, a few days before she passed. The screen read, "Tell Melina her voice opened a window in me." I sat still and let the air in. I read it 3 times. Then I hugged Marisol. Really hugged her. Not side hug or polite grip, but arms around. No words. Full weight shared. We stayed like that until the hallway emptied. A month later, I was asked to speak on a panel called Voices Who Almost Weren't. 5 women, 5 stories. Each of us had nearly given up. We spoke to a crowd of college students, songwriters, audio engineers, and quiet kids who hadn't said a word all semester. When it was my turn, I didn't read from the note cards I had written. I just said, "You don't need to be the loudest person in the room. You don't need a big family, a famous friend, or 100,000 followers." I looked out at them, some nodding slowly. You just need one truth inside you. One thing that makes you feel more you when you sing it. A girl in the back whispered to her friend, "That's it." And it was. I still live in the same apartment. The floors still creak. The windows still fog in winter. The radiator still makes a sound like it's trying to remember a song. But the space feels different now. It holds more. A shelf of fan letters. A gold-framed photo of my mom holding the first vinyl of my EP, crying on her porch. A pair of paper crowns Bella made for our concerts. A sticky note from Marisol taped to my mirror that says, "Sing like we're listening now." Because we are. And most days, I do. Not every song I write gets played on the radio. Not every line I write turns to gold. But every syllable comes from the same place now. Not silence, not performance. Just truth. A few weeks ago, I got an email from an independent theater company in Spain. They wanted to use Telescope Heart in a play about women finding their voices after years of being silenced. The director said, "It's the kind of song that sits beside you in a room and doesn't say anything but makes you feel brave enough to speak." I sat with that for a while. Then I stood up, opened the window, and sang the first verse out into the open air. There was no audience, no cameras, no applause. Just me, my voice, the sky, and the sound of wind passing through the leaves like it had been waiting for the melody. That's enough. That will always be enough.